Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Fairy Tale Wiki Twitter Talk. This is the King of Uncool bringing you episode 12. Today we have a really special guest. This is the very first time that I've ever actually interviewed somebody who's a friend of mine in real life, someone I met through an anime event of all things, and someone I've kept in regular touch with ever since. This is Catfish Pond. She's a fairy tale fan and also writes her own comic book series. And if anyone's interested, I definitely recommend checking it out. So, Catfish, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really glad to have you on. Been wanting to talk to you for a while. We had this planned out earlier on, but we decided that we're going to save it to the end because that's where we are at this point. So again, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So let's just jump right into it. You're a fan of the fairy tale series, so how did you initially get into it?
I was actually kind of a late fan. I had a general knowledge about it, and then I had my now fiance. He kind of told me about it. He was really obsessed. He's not a big anime fan, but he really liked this series, and he showed me his own original characters he created in the world. So that was my first real experience coming to understand it. And then I was at Anime North, and we were just having some downtime and sitting in one of the recreational rooms, and they had Fairy Tale playing. And that was the first time I had seen the anime. And I thought it looked really funny and really cute. So I immediately went and read all the manga.
How long ago was this?
Trying to remember how many years ago. When I started, so this all happened just before I started reading the manga, which is generally my favorite way to experience series, if possible. But I know I got in around the Tenro arc, so I'm not sure how many years back that was. Tenro Island arc.
Yeah, if you're talking about the anime, well, that originally aired in like 2012, so it's been a while in that case.
Yeah, I did get all caught up, and then I got to experience the series as it was going with other fans, which was really exciting.
What was it about Fairy Tale that really attracted you to the series?
It's funny because I've never really been much into like the shonen style anime. Like I enjoy it to a degree, but it's not what I would consider my top tier favorite. But there was something about Fairy Tale. The characters were so unique and so lively. And I also liked that there was a lot of main female characters. Some of the strongest characters in the series were female, which sometimes you don't always see in traditional shonen. So I really liked that. The magic was a lot of fun. There was a lot of emotion that I found kind of appealing. It was just a combination of so many different things. It was just right up my alley.
Yeah, those are definitely answers that I hear quite a bit, that people like the humor, that they like the emotion, and that they enjoyed having the strong female characters, because you don't really get that in, I think, any genre that isn't like a magical girls type series.
There's definitely some. I think the new age shonen is getting there. Like you have Promise Neverland, where the main character is Emma, obviously a female, and she's fantastic, but it's kind of an outlier as opposed to the norm, unfortunately. So it's getting there, but yeah, I do like that a good portion of the main cast in Fairy Tale are females, and they're just as capable as the men.
I've never seen Promise Neverland, so I'll definitely take your word on that, but I do see what you're saying, that there is a growing trend to have the women be more a part of the main cast and be more of a part of the action, which I think a lot of Fairy Tale fans really appreciate when it comes to a character like Lucy, who grows in competence over the series, or Wendy, who really grows up, or Urza, who's just really strong right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So speaking of the characters, I already know the answer to this, of course, but why don't we talk about your favorites? So who are your favorites in the series?
Gajeel, 100%. Gajeel is my absolute favorite. I have a shrine of him. He's my phone background in case. I love him so much. Apart from him, I really like Levy and Juvia. Those are probably my top 3 favorites.
What is it that you really like about Gajeel in particular?
I'm so glad you asked. So I feel like he is woefully like underrepresented. He is, first of all, he's really cool, but that's only kind of like the surface layer. I remember the first time he goes up on stage with his guitar and his goofy outfit and starts singing a goofy song. I was so blown away. But something about that complete shift of tone was so endearing. he is very emotional. He's very loving and creates really strong bonds. He's so much smarter than like he comes across. I won't get into any spoiler territory, but I just got, I think, caught up on 100-Year Arc, and he has like really fantastic what's the word I'm thinking of?
Deductive skills.
Deductive skills, intuition. That's the word I'm thinking of. He has really good intuition, and although people were telling him he was crazy, he was kind of right on the mark.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk a little bit more about 100-Year Quest and how it's changed him as a character, and plus a few other aspects of that I'm sure you're going to want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But for a moment, let's just flip it around. So who are some of your least favorite characters in the series?
So that's a really funny question. I thought a lot about this because Mishima is really funny and really smart. So he presents these characters in ways that I'm like, I really don't like them. And then through the story and their backstory and stuff like that, I kind of come around. I don't like to do that all the time because he does it a lot with his villains. And some of these villains I don't ever want to like. One of the main characters that I don't like Gray that much. But that said, he has his moments where I get really endeared to him. And currently, again, in the 100-Year Arc, I'm kind of really warming up to him more. I don't like Minerva at all, really. Even after they tried to do the whole like tragic come around, I've never really warmed up to her. But at the same time, I don't think I hate her. There's no one I really truly hate in the series, and he's really smart about that.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with parts about not enjoying Gray or thinking that Minerva's sudden change in tone was not great. But I certainly see where you're coming from in that if they aren't likable, it's probably because they're not meant to be likable, and therefore you're not really supposed to like them, and it's hard to fault Mishima for doing that per se. Yeah,
because then he tries to work it so that they do become important to the story, so you can't hate them forever. A lot of the villains I find have they turn around and are then important. Brandish was another one that I didn't like, and that he's trying really hard to make her important and reoccurring, and I don't care to see her when she comes up. But then again, after what you experience with her, I don't really hate her.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to as well, because she definitely did have, in my opinion, one of the more interesting personal arcs in the Alvarez arc when she initially appeared. But that's just my take.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of story arcs, though, let's talk about that for a bit. So what's your favorite one in Fairy Tail?
I thought a lot about this, too. I do have a special attachment to the Tenro Island arc, because that's where I really discovered Fairy Tail and jumped in. But my absolute favorite is probably the Grand Magic Games, which you probably hear a lot.
I definitely have heard it a couple of times. Let's just put it that way.
I've always had, in the shonen experiences that I've had, like for instance, when I was watching Naruto, like my favorite part about that was the testing they did, the Jonin test, I think it was called.
No, it was called the Chunin exams.
Tuning exams. I'm sorry, that's how long it's been since I've experienced anything Naruto. But I like those tests where they like kind of match characters up with opponents they may not have been matched up with, and I love that kind of. It's almost like a trend or
a TV trope.
Thank you. So that's actually like I love those kind of pair ups, and I think they did a really good job with the Grand Magic Games, because they had like these matchups and pair ups that you may not see, and interesting combat mechanics. Like I really like the one that Urza did, where like each monster you fought was a point, and then she just takes them all. I thought that was really funny and well handled. And the Grand Magic Games also features my absolute favorite moment in Fairy Tail.
And which moment would that be?
When Gajeel becomes the Shadow Iron Dragon Slayer.
Could have assumed as much, but yeah, just bring that out there for the listeners. So what are some of your least favorite arcs in the series?
In the anime, it's mostly the anime only arcs. I definitely think they're the weakest, but they do have their own unique appeal. In like the manga as well, it's funny. I didn't like the Edalus arc that much, but same with the characters. Mishima always presents these situations that I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. This is going to be really boring or really dumb. And then he kind of spins them in a way that I'm like, oh, that was actually kind of cool. So there's almost no point that I can think of that I hated it completely. It kind of dropped in interest a little bit, but I was never bored throughout it. But if I were to think back, if I were to like watch or read again, the points where I'd be kind of dreading having to re-experience it, I think Edalus might be it.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It is something that I hear a lot, mostly because it's very different from your typical fairy tale arc, and it's not as exciting to most people.
Yeah.
Although, given that you've mentioned it, I am curious, considering that Gajeel is your favorite character, how did you feel about his Edalus counterpart and the fact that he was anime only?
Was Gajeel's Edalus counterpart anime only?
Yeah, he was the undercover reporter dude who wears like a hat and glasses. He didn't appear in the manga.
I don't remember. I kind of experienced anime and manga kind of side by side, so maybe it just kind of blended in. I feel like he, like the character, I feel like he was well enough written that it could have been either or. When I saw him, I was a little disappointed. I'm like, what is this? Come on. But I actually liked him. I think that's another reason, sorry to go back to it, preach about Gajeel, is Mishima gets away with doing all these really wacky and out there things with him. Like some of his official art featuring Gajeel, his official sketches are really out there and wacky and stuff like that. Like him in like 70s disco wear. And it's funny because Gajeel always takes this stuff so seriously, and it's a really important part of his character, I think. So even though I was a little disappointed when I first saw Edalus Gajeel, I was like, this kind of fits his character, and I don't know, I kind of dug it.
Yeah, I definitely understand it. I think it was also a good idea to have him be separate from the Edalus Fairy Tale Guild members, and he's kind of an independent guy because theoretically Gajeel could have ended up the same way.
It's true. He did start that way, and could have proceeded that way. So yeah, and I love how Gajeel gets along with his counterpart too. It's really funny.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that part too. And actually, speaking of other Gajeel parts, I want to ask you your opinion about Gajeel's roles in the special OVAs, if you've seen any of them.
I have. You'd have to refresh my memory on specific ones, but I'm pretty sure I have seen them all.
Let's start with, I think it was the most recent one, the Punishment Game, where he basically is on the winning team and he gets to force various members of Team Natsu to just do whatever he wants.
Trying to remember more clearly. I do remember that specifically, but I think it's been a while since I've watched or read it. What I do remember is like he's so innocent, right? Like I think most of the Natsu's like that too, where like they don't think about so much like this, like the sexy aspects and stuff like that. I remember the part, I think, where Drunken Urza is the winner, and so I think he ends up with a broom in his butt, and it's just, again, it's goofy stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the part where he was doing a performance on stage and he made Lucy and Levy go up there in costumes of, I think it was Bunny.
Bunny, yeah, I think so, yeah, and Levy's kind of discouraged because she's not as well endowed as Lucy, and I think it's sweet that like that goes with what I'm saying. Like he doesn't think about that. Like he doesn't care that she's not as curvy as Lucy. Like he just wants to put on a good show.
Yeah, exactly. And it was entirely in her mind that was going on. It's clearly not what he thinks about because he clearly just wants her around.
Yeah, he wants to include her, I feel.
Yeah, much to her dismay in that particular encounter. But since we're on the topic of Gajeel and Levy, I want to ask you how you feel about their relationship.
I am so happy because I think Gajeel and Levy are kind of considered like secondary characters. I think he has more liberty to kind of confirm or deny certain aspects about their relationship, which you're not going to see, I think, as prominently for the main cast. Like Lucy and Natsu are definitely like a thing, but we've never had like that confirmation. Whereas with Gajil and Levy, like we've definitely had more fan service moments with them that are more
We've had
official.
more hints, I think, is one way to put it. Like, consider the bed sheets, for example. Very subtle, but definitely still.
I remember, because I follow a lot of Gajil and Levy blogs and stuff like that. Everyone was going crazy in that moment, like pointing out every like pixel detail kind of thing. But even more than just subtle hints, we've basically had like
we've had confirmation, and you're free to talk about that. This is a spoiler territory, so you can talk about whatever you want, including the content from 100-Year Quest.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so it's their relationship is basically cemented, and I remember when people saw that moment with the blanket, and they said that this moment before, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that was when they were going into the Alvarez big fight, was it?
It was literally like the night before.
Yeah, so this was like a big battle. They weren't sure if anyone of them were going to come back, and in some ways, Gajil may have not have. So like they were kind of spending their last night doing what they wanted, and it was heavily implied that they spent it together. And then we had the light novel, which was heavily implied, almost confirmed, that I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the titles of the light novels, but the one with the twins from the future, and they were basically confirmed to be Gajil and Levy's. And then later moment in the manga and anime, when Gajil is having visions of this life that he wanted, that he at the time thought he might not ever get. He dreamt of a family with Levy, and those twins were featured. So that was basically a confirmation there, and stuff like that makes me so happy. It was like I almost wish that Gajil was the main character, just so we could focus more on that. But I felt like having him in kind of as a side character, we did get more of those moments that I feel like he doesn't give us with some of the other main couples.
Yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from, especially considering the other main couples like Natsu and Lucy or Jalal and Urza, that they just haven't had as many moments as those two.
They've had a lot of fan service moments, but nothing concrete, unfortunately.
Yeah, nothing that was actually romantic per se, for the most part. Just one more topic on this, and then we'll move on. The 100-Year Quest arc has basically confirmed that they will be parents. So what was your reaction to that when you first read it?
I wasn't surprised per se, just because there was so many hints and kind of basic confirmations leading up to it. But I was so happy to have that just said out loud, and because there was some deniers, so it was like, you can't deny it now. Like, this is gonna happen, and it just, I don't know, something about their relationship, like it fits so well, and I'm just so happy for them because they're so cute.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to ask you one more question about Fairy Tail, and then we can move on. So what is the thing about Fairy Tail which you like the least?
The thing I like the least? It's definitely, now I'm not opposed to fan service. I like a little bit of tongue-in-cheek fan service, or like a little flash of something kind of sexy, but I do feel Mishima goes overboard. Which is too bad. I love the art so much in the manga. Sorry, mostly when I talk about it, I'm thinking of the manga. But he picks like these angles, which are upskirts and anything to accentuate like the women's features. And once in a while, I don't mind, but it becomes too much because it's so constant and it's a little tiring. The way he handles some of the female characters, especially Wendy, is a little uncomfortable sometimes. I don't know. I almost feel like it's a nitpick, but that was definitely something that would stand out to me.
I mean, personally, I agree with you. I don't think it's a nitpick. I think it's one of the more common criticisms of Mishima's art, and it's definitely justified. Yeah, I'm perfectly okay with it here and there to a certain extent, but when you have it in very important moments like the discussions with Walrod Seekin when they're all naked in a spa discussing the potential destruction of the world, or in the middle of a fight between dragons when Lucy's flying through the air naked, it definitely
Oh yeah,
feels out of place and totally inappropriate.
Lucy's clothes are always getting blown to bits, and
Yes, they are.
I love when characters in like big battles, they get kind of roughed up, they get like bruises and dirt smears and a little bit bloody, and like their clothes get
Because
torn a
that
bit.
makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm not opposed to the women getting roughed up a little bit too, because they're capable fighters and they're fighting their butts off, but they're constantly just getting torn down to like the bare minimum. So yeah, that would be my main criticism. For most other things, like I said, the way he handles some of the bad guys, and then he does like this sob story that makes us want to feel sympathetic. It gets a little tiring sometimes. Like sometimes I just want the characters just to be evil, and so it's almost like you can never feel good about rooting against someone because they always get turned around. That might be another thing. At the same point, I mean, that was Gajeel. Gajeel started off as the bad guy and then kind of turned around. I felt like he earned it a little bit better than sometimes how Mishima handles other characters. Like Gajeel definitely had to earn his trust and his respect with the guild, which in my opinion, is one of the best character arcs in the series, but I'm a little bit biased.
Well, I don't disagree with your point. I do think that it came too easily for other characters like Minerva, who you mentioned earlier, whereas Gajeel definitely did have to put more effort into it.
Other than that, I am a huge fan of Mishima's storytelling. There's some things I'm not excited for, but he kind of makes me a fan of it. But at large, I think he handles characters and storytelling really well. I was always really engaged.
And I think that's what's drawn a lot of people to the series as well. So turning that around, why don't we just spend a couple minutes talking about some of your other favorite anime or maybe movies as well, because that's how you and I originally met when we were at an anime movie screening watching Studio Ghibli as well as Makoto Shinkai's Your Name. So just get into that. What are some of your favorites?
So some of my favorite out of anime, I love magical girls. So I'm a really big fan of like Cardcaptor Sakura, Sailor Moon, Madoka Magica, and Princess Tutu. So that's the more cutesy side of my interest. I also like really dark and scary things, like the works of Junji Ito. I'm a huge fan of Junji Ito. I was able to get his autograph at TCAF last year. Some of my other favorite series, I like Evangelion, Genesis Evangelion. Umineko no Nakokoro ni is another one of my favorites. Some more obscure ones. I have a pretty broad range of interests, but for the most part, magical girls and horror anime are my two leading favorites.
Yeah, those are two pretty distinct genres.
Yeah. And it kind of shows in my writing style too. So I really like the writing style of I butchered his name, Kishi 07, who wrote the Higurashi and Umineko. I love the juxtaposition of genres where with Higurashi it starts off with these cute characters who are like school friends. They have a club and they're like best friends forever, and then the story flips and suddenly they're distrusting of each other, and the horrific events start taking place, and you still have these cute looking characters in these horrific situations. I love that juxtaposition of styles, and it kind of adapted it into my own writing.
I kid when I say this, but that just reminded me a lot of School Day.
I haven't yet watched that one, but I have heard similar things.
Go into it prepared if there's any advice I can give.
Okay.
But you did mention that it's influenced your own writing style. So yeah, let's just get right into that. I think that's one of the things that I want to hear more about as well, because I've been following you on Twitter for a couple of years now. But beyond what I know through that and what I've read when I've jumped into your stories, so what inspired you to start writing in the first place? And why don't you tell us about your story?
Okay, so I'll start off with what got me started. So I've known for a long time that I wanted to draw comics or manga. It started when I was in grade. Oh my god, I'm back in grade 6. I remember coming home after school and turning on the TV, and there was this ad for a new coming show called Card Captors, and I was so in love with the style and like what it was presenting the story to be. I was like, this is what I've always wanted. So it had the air date. I was there the first day it came onto TV, watched it, loved it, watched it. It was like my soap opera. Every day that the show aired, I was there at the TV, just waiting and ready, following along with the story. And I loved the art style. So I got my mom to buy me all these merchandise and stuff like that. I had the dolls, coloring sheets, and I used to trace over the coloring sheets and then turn them into my own characters, which is how I started kind of creating my own OCs. And then with those, I started making up stories. I work a lot with a friend of mine. We grew up doing this together. So we have a lot of stories together. And then I started writing my own stories. So back as far as then, I know I want to write stories. I didn't really think of it as something that was practical or something I could really do. I just knew I wanted to. So fast forward, I spent all high school just drawing. I had my math teacher once tell me to put it away Picasso because I would draw through every class. And then I told my mom I really wanted to go to this art college in Toronto called Max the Mutt because it was an art-focused college, and it had a program called Illustration Sequential Arts. So I'm like, this is it. I'm going to go to school for comics, and then I'm going to get a job drawing comics. My high school or my college experience was great. I learned a lot of the more nuanced techniques to creating comics. Up until that point, I was just kind of doing what felt natural. But through my degree in college, I was able to gain more technical skills. And then coming out of college, finding jobs in comics is not as easy as you would think. So I spent some years kind of networking and trying some things, and it was really hard to take off. And just a couple years ago, I was able to save up enough money, and my fiance was really supportive, and he said, why don't you take some time off and just try to focus on it? So the last couple years, I've been posting my comic online, and through Patreon, I've been getting a lot of support. I'm not quite at the point where I can support myself with my bills, but my fiance is helping me along, and yeah, I'm trying to make this the career. And so the comic I've been posting online is called Little Mizzy Muffet and the Spider King, which you can find on my website lmmatsk.com, which is the acronym, or you can also look for it on Webtoons Tapastic. It's about a girl named Mizzy Muffet who's terrified of spiders, and one day she's approached by the demon Spider King, who offers her 3 favors in exchange for her hand in marriage, but she says no way. And then all of a sudden, these strange supernatural things start happening that are putting her friends in danger. So then she has to reconsider the Spider King's offer.
What was your original inspiration for writing this particular story?
It was really funny. So these are actually characters I created back in high school. One of the many characters. I have several different stories I created, either alone or with my friend that I partner with a lot. So it started with I was big into like the anime Demon Boys kind of thing. Like Inuyasha was a big inspiration back in high school. So I created this kind of bratty looking spider demon character. He looks much like he does now, just maybe a little bit younger and with more attitude. And I was really fond of this character. So I thought to myself, like, well, what can I do with a spider character? And the first thing that came to mind was Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds away. And so then I created the Miss Muffet character, which turned into Mizzy. And then I thought that was really cute, but I didn't know how to stretch that into a longer story. So I started creating personified versions of all the nursery rhyme characters. And initially, my story was kind of an anthology of dark modern retellings of nursery rhymes. And then at some point, I started weaving their intricate stories together. So instead of them all being separate, they kind of all their lives and stories interwoven, which after many different iterations since high school has kind of developed into a final version, which I have since been adapting into a comic, which is starting the 12th chapter now.
I know a couple of years ago you started a Kickstarter for your project and you were finally able to get it off the ground a bit. This was in the summer of 2018. So what at the time really motivated you to do the Kickstarter, and what were some of the challenges that you faced along the way?
So I always knew I wanted to create stories into print. I always wanted physical copies, and I wanted them to be into comic book stores and sold on shelves, which is a lot harder than I ever imagined. But so the plan was always to have this book printed. I wrote it and designed the layout with print in mind. When I realized getting in with the publisher was going to be harder than I thought, I knew I'd have to self-publish. So originally I planned to foot the bill myself. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be to have a pile of books printed. But I have a friend that I met through these comic hosting websites like Tapastic and Webtoon, who told me, if you're going to self-print, try doing Kickstarter first. Because it's basically like pre-ordering a book. If you have enough fans and they want a copy, they'll be willing to pay up front. So I'd never dealt with Kickstarter before. I was a little apprehensive, but I thought if it didn't get funded, everyone got their money back. There was no harm. I would just at that point fit it myself, and I had such huge success. I was blown away. So I was asking for $2,500 to get the book printed, as well as some other merchandise to add as rewards for the different tiers. And I made that in like the first 3 days. I was like in tears. It's such a good feeling to have people want to support your own personal work. So in the end, I ended up making more than double that. I made $5,800. So the project was a success. I was able to get it printed and sent off, and since then, I have had extra copies, which I take with me to art conventions, where I have tables at artist alleys, and I'm able to promote my book there and put it out to an audience that maybe hadn't found me online.
Yeah, I've definitely been keeping up with you on Twitter for that. I mean, unfortunately, I missed you which is unfortunate, because I definitely wanted to come in, but work didn't quite permit it that day, let's say. Though I did read the story about your parents. I did find that very amusing, if embarrassing.
Oh yes, yeah. I had someone on the last day. They were walking by and they looked at my table and they stopped and they came back. They're like, "Are you the one selling the book?" I'm like, "Yeah," thinking maybe they had walked by the day before and heard my speech and were interested that way. And they're like, "I'd like a copy." I'm like, "Okay, cool." I package it up for them, giving them the change. I'm like, "Did I tell you about it yesterday?" Because I like to tell people what they're getting into, because I have confidence issues and I'm worried that people aren't going to like it. They're like, "Oh, no, your parents were outside yesterday telling me to come buy your book." I was so embarrassed. I'm like, "I am so sorry."
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I'm grateful for the support, but I like when people buy the book because they want to, not because someone told them to.
Yeah, being intimidated by someone's parents into supporting them isn't quite...
I gave them an earful after that.
Well, hopefully next time you won't have to deal with that. But I think that's pretty cool too. And so, as just a reader, I've always, or if of anything really, I've always been curious. How far into the series did you get to the point where you had finished what you had originally planned for, and then you just kind of had to make it up as you went along, or did that just never occur?
So the funny thing is, when you read some ongoing manga series from Japan, you can kind of feel when they're planning things as they go along. So a lot of times they'll have like the start in mind. They may have an end goal in mind and some points in between, but you can kind of get the sense in between they're just doing maybe what's popular at the time or what they think would be fun to do in between to get to those points. I have a hard time writing like that. I get really anxious when I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And the problem with writing like that is unless you're really good at it, you can lose continuity very easily. So because I've had this story in development since high school, which I won't tell you how long ago was for me, I have been able to fine-tune every detail of this story. So I know how many chapters there's going to be, what happens in each chapter. I even have a name for each chapter because each chapter is named after a different nursery rhyme. So I'm the kind of person who has to plan every detail ahead of time.
That's exactly what I was thinking about, specifically with Fairy Tail, because I know Mishima had only intended it to go around 100 chapters or so, so
Oh
it definitely
boy.
does feel like after a certain point or so, he's just making it up. And to an extent, it definitely still holds together
Oh yeah.
pretty well, but at the same time, it's like you can definitely tell what was originally planned years in advance and what he just kind of came up with on the fly.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
sometimes he reveals that as well in the volumes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly why I wanted to ask, because especially I really got into thinking of it because of a recent anime called Dr. Stone. Have you seen it?
I know of it. I haven't yet watched or read anything of it. I hear it's fantastic, though.
I really enjoy it, so I definitely recommend checking it out. But it's definitely one of those where I think they've got it planned out for a while because I know they've done very extensive research because it's very scientific.
Mm-hmm.
But I do worry that one day when they run out of their pre-planned material, they may have to start making up as they go along, and I'm definitely worried about that. But they haven't hit that point yet, so fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. If the writer is really good at what they do, they can either do it in a way that is hidden because you're having so much fun reading the story that you don't necessarily notice that it's going off on these weird tangents. You're just having so much fun along the way. One of the series I always notice, I read Degree Man, and I can tell when they're like, I believe it's a she that writes it. When the author is just going off on something completely new, and I don't even remember how that relates to the original story. So sometimes it can be very, very obvious. I assumed Mishima wrote like that. I didn't know specifically because there's points where you can kind of tell, but it wasn't one of those authors that ever bothered me.
Yeah, with him, he usually admits to it later on. Like, for example, in the final arc, he didn't initially plan that Irene would be Urza's mom. That just kind of came about spontaneously, and he worked it into the series afterwards.
Oh.
An example. And he originally only intended to go to, roughly the Phantom Lord Tower of Heaven arc. And you can kind of get this in the dialogue because, and perhaps this was anime only, but at some point or another, Lucy says that after a certain point, she never saw Urza's smile again, which is very odd because Urza still exists for the next 400-ish chapters. So evidently he had been planning to kill her off at some point, and he just backtracked on that.
Huh.
But I might be misremembering the specific dialogue, or maybe it was the dub. I don't know.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, you get that feeling. It's almost like they'll design a character, and they're either really popular or the author then becomes really attached, and then they write it so even though this character maybe was supposed to be evil and die, and that was supposed to be the end of the story, they become attached and then write them into the greater scheme of things. You can kind of get the sense when they do that. For example that I was thinking of earlier, I feel like Gajeel was meant to backstab them again when he was working with Raventail. But I don't know if it was one of those cases where Gajeel was just such a fan favorite, or Mishima just became so attached that he decided, no, wait, no, he's a double agent. That was the sense I got. I don't have any proof or confirmation about that, but that was the sense I got. I was really upset at the time, and I'm like, oh, great, well, I guess Gajeel's evil again, but...
Yeah, I know the parts of the story you're thinking about. I don't think he's ever said one way or another that he intended Gajeel to actually betray them. It's entirely possible that he was a double agent, considering the fact that pretty early on he handed Makarov a slip of paper with some kind of Raventail-related information. So, or he was just really good at setting it up. I'm not sure how that happened. I generally found the whole Raventail plot line to be pretty weak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was I felt like he had a lot of things in mind, and that's the dangers of writing stories as you go along. You could be setting up one storyline, and maybe it's not being well received because in Japan they're releasing these weekly, so they do get feedback. So they have the chance to be like, well, this isn't being well received, so let's do something different, which is good because, in a sense, because that way you appease the most amount of fans. But for me personally, like, I like to have my story in mind, and it may not jive with everybody, which is unfortunate. I like readers to enjoy the story, but I want to be true to my story. I don't want to change things to fit someone else's narrative. So there's definitely moments in Fairy Tale where I feel like he had something in mind and he changed it last minute, or maybe that was the way it was always meant to be, but it felt as if he was changing it for some other purpose. And I mean, that works really well for serialized weekly series like Fairy Tail and Naruto and all those shonen series. But for me personally, because I work alone, I don't have an editor to tell me, well, it doesn't really work. It's all the decisions are my own, and I may stumble and fail because I don't have all the answers and I'm only one person. But I'm proud of a series that is all my own, that I've created. I take all the credit and all the blame.
That's just what it is at the end of the day. If you put forth the work, it comes back to you.
Oh, for sure.
So anyway, I'd just like to open this up. Is there anything else you'd like to add on, or any shout outs you want to give, or something else that you'd like to talk about?
I don't know. For those who are not fans of Gajeel, maybe give him a second chance. He's a really good character and deserves more support. I'm honest God, I have a shrine for Gajeel. I love him so much. I feel like he is woefully underutilized. I hope as 100-Year Quest proceeds, he gets a little bit more. He becomes a little more important. He did rise the ranks because he was completely like a side character, but then he started popping up more in some of the more important moments in the story, and so I was really happy about that. I do hope 100-Year Quest gets an anime series. I saw your April Fool's prank.
Oh, thank you. I hope it fooled some people, and evidently, according to the comments, it did, because I remember waking up just like a couple hours later, and I had like 50 comments all screaming for my head.
that was a little bit mean, but I think it might happen.
I am a cruel person like that. And let's be real, they made it so easy.
It is. It was believable.
It was like the perfect time zone. Like it's a perfect timing because we don't have it. Everyone wants it. It's April. Who knows? Like if I do it again next year and people fall for it again, I'm just gonna be like, wow, guys.
Until it becomes an anime, it's just gonna be your yearly gag, and every year it's gonna be as believable as before.
That's entirely possible. I don't know. Like considering that this is a bi-weekly series and we're only at, I think, 50-something chapters in so far. It probably will be, a couple more years till we get any anime announcements, but I'm okay with that. So, I mean, honestly, I'm just looking to have a big impact. I'm not necessarily looking to be mean, but if the opportunity comes, I'm not, you follow me on Twitter, I'm not necessarily shy about saying what I want.
Mm-hmm. And it creates awareness.
But, yeah. Yeah, no, that's true too. I mean, it was a popular tweet.
People want it, that's for sure.
That's true, and I think it's understandable. There's definitely it's like Fairy Tale in general. There's some good and some bad there. So, and I can definitely understand the appeal of the 100-Year Quest because the original series hyped it up, and people read the first couple of chapters and like, wow, these dragons seem cool or whatever.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you should mention that. Because Fairy Tale ended, and for a while there, it was considered done. Back then, I was hoping for a new series, which was going to feature the second generation, or not the second, but you know what I mean, the next generation of Fairy Tale wizards, which was going to be
like that Boruto continuation kind of thing that the Naruto series got.
I was so mad when they made Boruto because I'm like, okay, well now that they've done that, either Mishima will never do it now, because I had this wish since before Boruto. But also, since Fairy Tale ended, I love Fairy Tale so much that I actually created my own cast of like characters set in the same world, not part of the Fairy Tale guild, but a guild in a Fairy Tale world. And
like kind of OCs.
Yeah, and 100-Year Quest kind of ruined my my plans. Because my character, my element is water, so I had my character was a water dragon slayer, and Now I have to reconsider maybe.
I mean, I feel like you could still do that.
I probably will, because I've had this plan since some point before the end of Fairy Tale, and I am very fond of this story. I may rebrand it as not Fairy Tale fan story, but this is a story I created with my friend. We're really fond of the characters and stuff like that, so I'm considering, after the end of Little Missy Muffet and the Spire King, maybe making that my next webcomic. We'll have to see.
Well, if you do, then I will definitely be there to check it out.
I thought you might like that.
I mean, I like all your stories, but I think Fairy Tale in particular, because it's been something that I've been, watching or reading for however many years, that it is something that I like, and I like the idea of, guilds and magic and all that stuff.
I'm so in love with the world of Fairy Tale. There's so much potential. I'm so excited for the game coming out. I really hope that does well. I'm gonna buy that and play that once it comes out. I feel like Fairy Tale is such an immersive world. I feel like there could be hundreds of guilds just like Fairy Tale across that entire. You have to remind me.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Is Fiore their planet, or is it?
No, Fiore is their
continent?
Country.
Yeah.
Fiore is the country. Ishgar, I believe, is the whole continent.
Okay.
Guillotina is another continent, which is where the 100-year quest is taking place. And
right.
Earthland is the entire world. As far that, those are my general. The geography is a little bit messed up. I will admit.
A little bit. I need a map, but yeah. So I feel like across.
Yeah, there is a map. You can check out Fairy Tale Wiki, but there is a map that Mishima gave, and there's a lot of parts of it that just don't necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
Because of just the way it's drawn. But it's it is what it is. I mean, I'm sure that with the 100-year quest, we'll probably get a little bit more information about that later on.
I think so, since they're in a new place. But I just crave more content in that world. I love the idea of guilds and doing the jobs and the different magics, and I just in any form, I am completely up for more Fairy Tale content in some form. It's just such an immersive world.
And if you like the idea of guilds and magic and stuff, I don't know if you've seen it, but I definitely recommend checking out Konosuba.
I have heard of it. I know you're a fan.
You would be right.
Yeah, I love those kind of worlds. Another one I forgot to mention, one of my other favorite current animes is Re:Zero, which does everything I like in Fairy Tale, but almost a little bit more polished, if you know what I mean. The
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, Re:Zero is started as a light novel. Correct me if I'm mistaken here. But the author I was hearing, he has anything, even things that aren't appearing in the story. He has all these things planned out, all the conflicts going on in the background. It's everything is, and that's the writing style really appeals to me too. But that's a similar story to Fairy Tale in terms of fantasy world and magic and really engaging characters. That's something I forgot to mention, but I am a big fan of Re:Zero.
When it comes to the plot line of a young guy traveling to an alternate world, I do prefer Konosuba, but I do think Re:Zero has its appeal as well, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no shortage of isekai, are there?
No, that's definitely a genre that has taken off quite considerably these last 5 or so years, and we even just we got the reboot of the Digimon series.
Yes, I do love Digimon. That was one of the ones I grew up with.
Yeah, same here. Well, I mean, we're from the same country, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I believe we're in around the same age. I might be a little older.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of derailed your closing, but in short, I love Fairy Tale. I love the world. I want more, and hopefully we'll get some.
I definitely think we will, and I definitely also think that when it comes to Fairy Tale, there's a lot more to expect from this game, and as well as the other content that we'll probably get at some point or another. But as far as this content goes, I think we're going to close this interview off. So again, Catfish, I just really want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. Really appreciate it. I know that considering the coronavirus situation, most of us don't really have anything else to do, but I still appreciate the commitment.
I'm always down to talk about one of my absolute favorite series.
Well, you know what? We'll maybe look into doing this again as a group chat or something along those lines. Who knows?
Absolutely.
All right, so viewers, thank you again for tuning in to Fairy Tale Wiki Twitter Talk. This is episode 12. We may be back with a special to close out the month of April, or we may not. I have no idea yet. But thank you for sticking with us for 12 episodes. This has been something that I've been working on for a long time, and I really appreciate the effort. of all our previous guests and our staff who's worked behind the scenes, including shout out to Rye from the Fairy Tale Wiki. Rye, you are a very lazy bastard, but you're still one of the best friends I have. So thank you again. And from the King of Uncool, goodbye, people.
Bye-bye.